Good afternoon, it's Tuesday, December 22. I'm Anthony Lugg with the Midday News. A special welcome if you're watching on onespotmedia.com. There is more advocacy for the rejection of an environmental impact assessment related to mining in a section of the Cockpit Country in Trelawney. Now, two academics argue that there are not enough data in the report to properly assess the long-term damage to the environment in the area. More in this report.
Environmentalists, scientists, and other civic groups have been objecting to the mining of a section of the Cockpit Country in Trelawney, pointing to irreparable harm that would take place with a ripple effect on nearby communities. This is in contrast to Noranda and its stakeholders sharing data explaining the massive potential economic benefits of the project. Coordinator of the Institute for Sustainable Development at the University of the West Indies, Mona, Dr. David Smith, says there are not enough figures in the report for a proper assessment, and in other areas it is short on details. He gave his views in the RJR Gleaner Group Town Hall meeting last night.
Fix the system, do what the Auditor General said, and also follow the recommendations of the 2010 report that Clayton did. And for this specific EIA, demand quantitative evidence.
And senior lecturer in the Department of Geography and Geology at the University of the West Indies, Mona, Dr. Arpita Mandal, raised a critical question about the risk of water contamination. She argues that even though the report indicates there is no such risk, it needs more details and data to support the conclusions.
If at all they have tested any water quality existing at the moment, what is the water quality? Surface water, groundwater, whatever in the nearby. I don't see the pre-mining stage quality to say that, okay, post-mining, this will be the deterioration. Normally, when a development or anything is proposed, we see a pre and a post. So I don't see specific data on the water quality from the streams, from the springs or caves or whatever sampling. Only data I see is the dye tracing. So that is a little bit, I'm not very clear about those details about the underground flow direction. Those are missing from the EIA.
Dr. Smith also pointed to a potential crisis for farming communities in the Cockpit Country based on information in the Environmental Impact Assessment Report.
The National Heritage Trust said, look, the land use pattern there is that people don't touch the hills, they use the depressions. That's where people farm, it's where people live. It's also where you mine. Nobody's mining the hills, they're only mining the places where people farm. Mm-hmm. And that is something which isn't really raised or addressed properly, is that the mining is actually directly aimed at where people are currently using the land to generate their livelihoods. It's not like people are making a living on the hills and you're taking away the soil at the bottom. People are making their living in the soil at the bottom of the cockpits, and that's where you're mining. And that's something which you have to bear in mind. Yes, you might leave the hills intact, but nobody was living up there anyway.
O'Shane Masters, TVJ News.
In the meantime, Dr. Smith is calling for a revamp of the legislation which governs mining in the country and the compensation provided.
Legislative framework, forget the specifics of this EIA, that the laws that the miners have to deal with are inadequate. We know so much more about values of the environment and social values that we do now than we did when the laws were written, that we need to revamp those laws so that when we're talking about compensation, we actually mean something meaningful. If we're talking about restoring land, we actually mean restoring land and not putting grass where there used to be trees, etc., etc. And one of the problems is that we have a system that is not being fixed. We're sort of fixing one thing at a time when a problem comes up, but we're not fixing the system.
Opposition spokesman on health, Dr. Maurice Guy, is calling for an extensive testing regime to determine whether the new strain of the coronavirus is already in the country. This following the ban on all flights coming from the UK, where the new strain of the coronavirus is spreading. More in this report. Recently, a new strain of the coronavirus was detected in the UK. Given the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the island, the government is not taking the new strain of the virus lightly. Therefore, on Monday, the government banned all flights coming into the island from the UK for a period of 2 weeks ending January 4, 2021. While that may bring some relief to citizens regarding their safety, there are concerns about visitors who may have already arrived in the country just days before the ban took effect. Opposition spokesman on health, Dr. Maurice Guy, raised the concern while speaking on Radio Jamaica's Beyond the Headlines on Monday. Dr. Guy said those persons must be tested to determine whether the new variant of the coronavirus is already in Jamaica. The government had announced that testing and quarantining of persons who arrived on Monday, but Dr. Guy wants more extensive testing.
Testing will not only involve doing PCR testing, but also getting samples that they can send to our international partners to indicate, for them to do further testing to indicate whether that particular variant is here. We have always been testing, and this COVID testing will detect the genetic material, whether it is a variant or the original virus. Now, what we need to know is whether we are seeing this variant here too. We do not have the capacity in this country to do it, but we have virologists, we have a lab, and we have international partners. We could enter into some form of arrangement with them to find out whether we are seeing this as well.
Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton says there will be enhanced follow-up measures for persons from the UK who are already in Jamaica.
What we will therefore do is follow up more precisely on persons coming in from the UK. So, in a sense, you would follow up on, 1 in every 5 or 1 in every 10, depending on the circumstances. Given the added risks around this virus and the fact that some persons have come in over the last few weeks while this discussion has been taking place, the follow-up would be intensified to see if they are complying with the quarantine arrangements. And if they have symptoms, we can apply the contact tracing and the testing as appropriate.
The Ministry of Health says some 302 passengers who arrived on a flight from the UK on Monday will be kept in state quarantine for a minimum of 48 hours. Those travelers who test negative for COVID-19 will be released to complete their mandatory 14-day quarantine, while those who are positive will be isolated until recovered. Anthony Lowe. The High Commission has announced a special flight from Montego Bay to London tomorrow. The flight will leave at 7:30 p.m. The special flight follows the closure of Jamaica's borders to flights from the UK for 2 weeks. Jamaica's COVID-19 death toll has increased to 288 after the respiratory illness claimed 2 more lives. The latest cases include a 53-year-old woman from the corporate area and a 95-year-old Westmoreland man whose death was previously under investigation. The Ministry of Health says another death is being investigated. Meanwhile, a 2-month-old child is among 65 persons who tested positive for COVID-19 in Jamaica yesterday. This has increased the country's case count to 12,354. The Health Ministry has reported that 75 persons remain hospitalized with a respiratory illness. 6 are critically ill. And clinical virologist at the University of Leicester in England, Dr. Julian Tang, is predicting that COVID-19 will become seasonal in countries and vaccines will have to be received every 2 years in order to build up immunity in populations. Dr. Tang, who was speaking on TVJ Smile Jamaica on Tuesday, says the immunity will last longer than influenza as COVID-19 mutates less.
And I think the vaccines may have to be boosted every 1 to 2 years because this virus mutates less than influenza and the immunity may last a bit longer than it does for influenza. But you may have to have the vaccine, say, once every 2 or 3 years, and it'll still be with us because don't forget, newborn babies may not be vaccinated and they'll be susceptible to the virus. So often newborn babies who are vulnerable to all viruses can actually maintain reservoir of the virus in the population to spread to mum and dad if their immunity is waning over time.
And it's time for a break. Stay with us. More stories when we return. Welcome back. Continuing the news. A Jamaican immigrant couple was free to leave a Pennsylvania church Monday after over 2 years using it as sanctuary. Onita and Clive Thompson stepped outside of Tabernacle United Church in Westfield, Philadelphia for the first time in 843 days. This after they received a letter from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement saying the agency will support their case to stay in this country. The couple came to the U.S. at 15 years ago after they fled gang violence in Jamaica.
I just wanted to hide deeper in the walls of the church. And other days, I just want to kick the walls down. Not the physical walls of the church, but the walls of injustice, the walls of racism, the walls of lies, the walls of a black woman don't have a voice.
Onita and Clive Thompson have 7 children. 3 of them are U.S. citizens. The 2 youngest children stayed in the church with the couple as they hid. And the main suspect in the murder of a teacher in Mandover, Manchester last year was taken into custody when the case was called up in the Manchester Circuit Court. Bishop Gibson High School teacher Carolyn Davis Campbell was shot and killed in 2019 and her husband charged. He was later granted bail, but the court has now changed that.
Gregory Campbell was charged with the murder of his wife, Carolyn Davis Campbell, who was a teacher at the Bishop Gibson High School in Manchester. Mrs. Campbell was fatally shot at her home in Melrose Mews during a home invasion. Mr. Campbell was charged after being questioned by the police. He was, however, released on $1 million bail. When the case was heard again on Friday, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, DPP, stated that after reviewing the files, it did not believe Mr. Campbell should continue being out on bail. Upon hearing the arguments, Chief Justice Brian Sykes overturned the bail, ordering that Mr. Campbell be taken into custody. On July 10 last year, gunmen invaded the Campbell's home. Mrs. Davis Campbell was fatally shot. However, Mr. Campbell, who was also at the house at the time, was not injured. The Manchester police said they decided to charge Mr. Campbell as during questioning he had given conflicting information to the police. The case is to be called up again on January 15, 2021.
The Burton Main Road in St. Elizabeth was yesterday the scene of a deadly crash. 23-year-old Orain Dixon, a vendor of Burnt Savannah, St. Elizabeth, died shortly after midday while driving his motorcycle. The motorcycle reportedly collided with a Toyota RAV4. Mr. Dixon was pronounced dead at the Black River Hospital. The number of road fatalities in the parish now stands at 37, the highest being recorded in the past 3 years. Head of the St. Elizabeth Police Division, Deputy Superintendent Nardia Sims, is encouraging motorists to exercise caution when using the roadway during the Yuletide season. Now, fisherfolk in Manchester, Portland, are appealing to the relevant agency to address a matter that has been plaguing them for years. They complained about not having proper bathroom facilities, which they say affect their business.
We need a bathroom because no one the fisherman them, the fisherwoman them, the people them run them business. For use no water, no there around here.
Castile Smith, who has been fishing for over 40 years, said he's struggling to cope since the recent heavy rains damaged his equipment. It's the reason he's appealing to the government for assistance.
We in Mancini fishing village, we were hard with set traps, but the bad weather damaged a lot of our equipment. You want 10 to 20 roll a wire, we can be a part. I said, look about it. We need one wire to put them on, but we don't have enough money, $20,000 and $25,000 for a roll of wire, $15,000 at least. And every day we can find that. But sometimes we need help from you all.
Cayman Islands housekeeper Makiva Bush was yesterday handed a suspended sentence for 3 assault charges leveled against him following an altercation in a local bar earlier this year. When he appeared in court, Bush was sentenced to 2 months imprisonment on each assault. The charges are to run concurrently, but they were suspended for 2 years. Although the veteran politician was not sentenced to jail, he will have a conviction recorded against him. He was also ordered to adhere to a curfew for the next 2 months and was fined $700 for disorderly conduct. The former Cayman premier will also have to pay compensation to the victim for medical expenses and emotional distress. To news in sports now, athletes preparing for the postponed Tokyo Olympics Games next year will be provided with psychological assistance by the government. Details from Jordan Fort.
The Athletes Assistance Program, which saw 145 athletes training for the Tokyo Olympics receive $80,000 a month, was suspended in July following the postponement of the Games. But with the quadrennial multi-sport event set to take place next year, Sports Minister Olivia Grange says the program will come back on board soon. But there is also an addition, which has to do with mental health.
We're also providing support through a mental health program through the Jamaica Athletes Insurance Plan to help the athletes to get back into a frame of mind, to overcome the setback that they have had, and to prepare themselves to be ready for the Olympics.
In the meantime, with plans in motion to stage the ISA Boys and Girls Championships next year, high school athletics has also received a major boost. 7 schools on Monday got hurdles through a partnership between the Jamaican and the Japanese governments to assist in their development. J3A's president Garth Gale says Monday's handover was born out of a meeting between former President Dr. Blake and the Japanese authorities.
When we visited 3 years ago, the President Blake and I met with Mr. Amasaki, and we thought of how best they could assist us. And today is the second of handing over of hurdles to the J3As, and we in turn has given to schools that are we deemed in need of hurdles for continuing their training program.
With a number of the schools in receipt of the hurdles being from the East, ISA President Keith Wellington says it's a step in the right direction in terms of leveling the playing field.
Well, we think that is very important. Our students' development depend heavily on the resources available at the schools. If you note, the hurdles were shared with schools who have less resources than some of the top schools, and I think by sharing these resources amongst the less fortunate, if I may call them that, it gives us a great opportunity to discover talents that may otherwise go undiscovered.
Titchfield High, Fogo Road, St Andrew Technical, Rousseau and Windward Road Primary were the other schools to receive hurdles. The handing over was done by Chairman of the Totori Athletic Association, Shinichi Hamasaki.
And that's the Midday News. I'm Anthony Lugg. Join us at 7 for Primetime News. On behalf of the news, sports and production teams, good afternoon.